Good evening. Welcome back to Money Mondays, a series on legal rights during the COVID-19 pandemic. We hope you had an opportunity to view one of our prior discussions, Money Mondays, a series on legal rights. We look forward to beginning tonight's session. Next slide, please. Before we hop into our new topic, we have a few updates we need to share with you. First, if you receive SSI or VA benefits and have a qualifying child under the age of 17 and did not file a tax return in 2018 or 19, you have until May 5th, that's tomorrow, you have until tomorrow to register to receive your $500 stimulus payment for your child or children. You can do that by visiting the IRS portal at the link provided on the screen. Additional information about the stimulus payments and frequently asked questions can be found online at irs.gov/coronavirus. Secondly, to follow up our small business presentation, there are 3 additional opportunities we'd like to share with you. St. Louis County recently began accepting applications for a small business relief program, which offers a one-time grant of up to $15,000 for businesses, sole proprietors, and nonprofit organizations in St. Louis County with 50 or fewer employees. For additional information, you can visit them online at stlcorona.com. Next, the Red Backpack Fund is also accepting applications for grants of $5,000. They're starting a new application cycle each month through August. The applications for the May cycle will be accepted until May 11, 2020 at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. Additional information can be found on their website. And lastly, before we begin our session, the UMSL College of Business is hosting the Midwest Digital Marketing Conference virtually this year. The conference will take place on May 20th and 21st, with on-demand sessions available May 25th through the 29th. If you are a small or medium-sized business in the St. Louis area, you can receive up to 2 free tickets and access over 70 on-demand breakout sessions. With businesses needing to increase their online presence and sales given the stay-at-home and social distancing orders, we hope this resource will be of benefit to you. Next slide, please. We recognize that things are rapidly changing around us. We will continue to keep you informed of any updates and developments as they occur. At Legal Services, we act for others. We are a voice for justice, and our actions provide hope. We remain dedicated to helping individuals, families, and small businesses in need during the COVID-19 crisis. Next slide. And we are proud to partner with the St. Louis Regional Financial Empowerment Coalition to bring you reliable information during your legal rights, as well as Money Smart St. Louis. Next slide. Next slide, please. Tonight, Attorney Terry Lawson will be discussing how you can avoid COVID-19 scams and protect yourself from consumer frauds. Please note that Mr. Lawson will not be able to view your questions or comments while speaking. He will try to address your concerns live at the end of the presentation. I will now turn the presentation over to Mr. Lawson. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, and I'm very happy to be here today. I am Terry Lawson, a consumer attorney in the Legal Services Eastern Missouri St. Louis office. We do work with a variety of folks on various consumer issues. And with the current crisis, COVID-19 has been in the news a ton. And of course, we have many different resources that are made available to consumers and to all Americans through the legislation that Congress recently passed. And so with that comes a variety of types of scams that relate to the COVID-19 crisis that we are all presently in. So what we thought we would do for you today is go over a few of these scams that might exist with quite a bit of the resources available from the FTC. And we're going to discuss for you how you might recognize these crises and what you can do to avoid the scams that are coming up. The best time for most scammers to react to someone and to convince them that a con is accurate is when that person is under stress. And since we have so many stresses in our environment today, you really want to be vigilant for these various problems that we see. Some of the things we'll go over on this slide here on number 6, and we will make sure that we cover a variety of different topics, from scams related to the stimulus payments that people might receive, unsolicited text messages, multi-level marketing, telework vulnerabilities if you work from home. If your children are in school and you have an educational technology platform, we're going to talk a little about what you should do to avoid that as a danger, or as a computer hack that might be a problem for your students or children. And we're also going to talk some about business email compromises, and even some scams directed towards Section 8 housing participants that we've seen lately. So all kinds of tips here today. As I like to say, strap on your running shoes. We're going to go through these, and hopefully you'll learn a few things to avoid. And if you have questions, remember, go ahead and put those in our posts and we can respond to those later. I also want to say straight away, there are 3 major resources for you to complain about scams that you notice. The FTC itself will have links to the FTC today. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, will be another resource for you at the federal government. And the Missouri Attorney General's office also has a complaint line, both telephone and email and on the web, if you experience any scams. The thing to remember about a complaint is that if you make a complaint, you might have the same problem many others have had. And once the government can recognize that there is a problem, the full force of the government can be brought to bear on that problem. An Attorney General's office or the United States attorneys will be able to then sue or at least investigate that particular scam. So it does pay to complain to those organizations, and make sure that you do that if you experience any of these problems. Moving right along, one of the first things we thought we would touch is the coronavirus stimulus checks that folks will receive. These are also called relief payments. The CARES Act was recently passed by Congress in March, and in March of 2020, it also contained a variety of protections, but a stimulus and what they really recognized as relief for those that are touched by this crisis. Already, we know of certain types of tricks that are coming out that we want you to be aware of. For example, this first one, pay a fee and get your payment right away. This would literally be someone trying to contact you and say, well, if you pay this payment to me, I can get you your check faster. Or if you don't pay it, you're not going to receive your check, something like that. Those are obvious scams. And so we want to make sure you know there will be no fee to receive a stimulus check, a CARES Act relief check as a result of this, the CARES Act. Next, if we see someone calling, for example, or seeking you out through a text message, and they say, oh, we need your Social Security, your bank account number, your benefits card number to confirm your payment, okay? Never would you be called by the IRS to get this kind of information. The IRS and the United States Treasury will be issuing the checks, and there will never need to be some sort of follow-up. Of course, if the US Treasury knows of you and you've received benefits at all, or you've paid taxes at all, that information is all available to them already in their databases. And you would never need to share a Social Security number, bank account number, etc. Make sure that that's not something you do. You go ahead and if someone reaches out to you like that, report the scam, but certainly don't provide that information. Another trick we might see is someone saying, oh, you know what, we sent you a check, but we actually overpaid you. Please send that check back to us right away for the overpayment. If that happens, it can actually just be a typical check scam like any other check scam. Let me explain how these should work. When someone sends you a check and then they request a payment back, what's really happening is they're taking that check, giving you potentially a false check, hoping you write a new check or make a draw on your account out of your real money. So they have fake money they give to you. And then when you send money back, it's your real money going out the door. And the check they gave is a false one. This is another way to know this is check kiting. And this is a very, very old trick with checks, but we expect to see some of this even with coronavirus checks. If there's a fake check and someone says, you need to send money back to me, certainly don't fall prey to that. Anyone who asks for personal information of you in this process of obtaining your stimulus, your relief payment check, those people are doing something called phishing. My little red dot pointer here is circling that. This is not spelled like a fish in a pond, but P-H-I-S-H. Phishing is a scam that is basically a hacker trying to gather enough data about you so that they can hack into something of value. And phishing is commonly used in a variety of ways, but we know that this time when people are receiving money and they're eager to get that money, it would be an easy way for scammers to encourage a person to share information that maybe they shouldn't. If you're really eager to get the check and they say, well, if you'll just give us your social, we can send it right out. Now they have that social security number. That is absolutely what you don't want to do. So be sure to use the IRS website, irs.gov, coronavirus economic impact payment. There is a website here that gives information about what you might need to receive a payment, or information about how you would go about receiving your payments. The IRS is never going to call or text you and ask for that type of information. There's not going to be an email or anything like that from the government. That's a sure sign that it is a scam. Okay. You'll never have to pay to get your relief payment. Make sure that you realize you're not going to pay out, someone's paying you. It wouldn't make sense for you to have to pay. That would be illogical. And if you stop and think about it, if it doesn't sound right, odds are very good that it probably isn't. And you want to make sure to avoid that issue. The IRS is also, of course, never going to tell you to send some of the money back. That's probably a check scam. And there's a specific FTC site for that type of scam. And it's listed right in here. You're welcome to go to the website and check out fake check scams. Unsolicited text messages. These are another type of information that we might see come out. And in fact, we have already heard some reports of people receiving these texts. First of all, you have some are advertising tests for COVID-19, and people desperate to receive a test might see these advertisements or text messages and think that they can get a test easier if they respond. That's simply not true. There aren't going to be legitimate businesses that are going to text or email about how to go get a COVID-19 test. That's going to be done through the public health system and not through other companies pretending to be the public health system. There's also been offers for loans for small businesses or offering money to people who are quarantined. And these are also likely scams that you want to avoid with things that people have already seen occur. Remember the official channels of the federal and state government. You can go to those and get more information. You can certainly check our website, Legal Services, for information. But things where you just suddenly get a random message saying, if you're quarantined at home, you can receive money, that's almost certainly going to be another scam to avoid. So don't fall prey to those. Another type of text message scam or email scam that we might see is something that looks like it's a government logo, very important sounding language to make you believe that that message is legitimate. But no government agencies send messages like this. If you doubt for a minute that that message is real, then it probably isn't real. You have to listen to your gut on these things, and it's okay to tell a caller if they call you, or if you must respond to a text, which I really confidently can say that's not the best approach. But if you ever do respond, it should be, well, I'm going to contact the government separately. And then you go to a different location or a different source and a phone, email, what have you, and you make your own inquiries separately. Don't just respond, because of course, if this is a false person, you wouldn't want to be responding and providing more and more information. You can look things up and contact the government agencies on your own. And that's what you should do if you think you have something that may or may not be legitimate. At least go to a separate access point to find out. Here's an interesting little tip. I call this the pro tip here. The more errors a text or an email might have, the more likely that that is a scam. And that surprises a lot of people. Why is it that it would be more likely for a scammer who wants to make money off of unsuspecting public? Why would they put errors in a message on purpose? You know, the first thought is, well, maybe it's because they just don't know better and they're writing these things in a really terrible way. Maybe the English isn't their first language, maybe a lot of things. But you know what? Most scammers try to be shrewd. They try to be sneaky. And you know what they're really doing when they send something that has a lot of errors in it? They're trying to sort out who is paying close attention and who is not paying close attention. Scammers know that those that don't notice mistakes are more likely to fall for the scam that they're presenting. So they purposely often will insert errors in the messages, thinking that, well, if this person doesn't notice all the problems with this message, then probably they're an easy mark for me. They're an easy person to trick. So you absolutely want to pay attention to that and make sure that they are not taking advantage of you in that way. They want to filter out people that spot the errors, and those folks would ask too many questions. And that should be you as well. So if you see errors in the message, certainly assume that it's probably a false message. If you see language that doesn't look right, assume that it's almost certainly a scam, because what they're really hoping is to just find the folks who won't pay any attention at all. And don't let that be you. Now, more things as tips to avoid text messages and things of that nature that could be a scam. First, do not click on links. Links within a text message, unless you are certain of the source, could really go to anywhere. Those links might expose you to scams or to download software onto your phone or your computer, or even get your number added to various lists that are sold to bad actors. These bad actors could include places that sell phone lists for telemarketing or for other scammers. So you absolutely don't want to link yourself to some database by clicking the link. Instead, go ahead and delete those text messages right away. You can report suspicious text messages if you think you have a false one to the FTC. Here at this website, again, I mentioned complaining does matter, ftc.gov/complaint. That helps stop these messages in the future. As things are tracked, the more people complain, the quicker everyone can find out who's behind it. Another area that we are starting to see more of, and something that FTC only recently announced, is as of April 24th even, there are things called multi-level marketing companies. And what these are would be a type of company where they may offer some sort of product, make some sort of claim that they can treat or prevent coronavirus disease. And the idea there is they would say, you could help everyone eliminate this deadly virus by working with me. And oh, by the way, you could work at home and you can make additional money. But what middle level marketing or multi-level marketing companies do is they actually distribute products through a network of distributors. And the party who starts the scam in this pyramid scam, right, says, well, you need to find some people that'll be under you in the distribution. So they find someone, and then that person has to find someone, and so forth. And everyone is supposed to share profit in this scheme. But in a pyramid scam, also known as a Ponzi scam, these scams never can sustain. Even if they're selling a real product, it's almost impossible for a pyramid like this to work, because eventually more people can't be added into the lower and lower tiers. And so you end up losing money in the long run. Never mind the fact that a lot of these with COVID-19 are simply false claims, spurious health claims that have no validity in medical science, but are merely made as really just a scheme to stack a bunch of people under the scammer in order for them to send checks up the line. Multi-level marketing is almost always bad. It's very difficult to make money, even in a legitimate product, and certainly a bad product if the goal is to try to solve the COVID-19 crisis this way. Here are some of the sample messages you might see in these types of marketing companies, particularly on social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, and so forth. You know, turn a small investment into 6 figures. Everyone's getting stimulus checks right now. What a great investment time. These are the things that you want to kind of avoid. You know, look out for these hashtags, can't pay my bills, hashtag side hustle, etc. We're not saying that every hashtag is going to be a false one, but the ones that are seeking, particularly the COVID-related claims, it's very doubtful these are going to be viable companies. Moving along, we want to make sure that if you are going to look at all at a multi-level marketing company, you do search online for the name of the company and check for any reviews or scams. You can check Better Business Bureau, but also you can and should check with the FTC, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, etc. If it looks too good to be true, it almost certainly isn't correct. It's almost certainly going to be false. Now, we have seen recently and locally even Section 8 scammers that are actually trying to convince people to essentially, instead of seeking out legitimate Section 8 housing, they want them to try to pay a fee so that they can get their Section 8 housing voucher money, essentially. It wouldn't be directly from the voucher because the fee you would pay would be cash, but they're impersonating the housing authority or someone that could link you to either a housing authority or to a landlord. And so if you have a housing problem now and you start receiving emails or texting, we have seen in our office messages that do not look legitimate going out to people saying, hey, we think if you'll pay us a fee, we can help you find housing, to a place to use your voucher. And keep in mind that again, it's too good to be true, and it's not usually how it's going to work. You're not going to get an email from someone with a Gmail account, hey, just, come talk to me and pay me a little money, and all of a sudden the lottery will work for you. You'll be able to get your voucher more quickly. These are things that just shouldn't sound right to you, and make sure that even if you know anyone that is seeking housing, they're not falling prey to these local scams. You can always contact your local housing authority to find out how to register for the Section 8 waiting list lottery. You can find the email and phone number on the HUD site, and you can follow those instructions to sign up. Again, housing authorities would not charge a fee, and they're not going to reach out by phone and email to join wait lists. So make sure that you don't fall prey to that type of scam. You can, most importantly, protect your social security number and your personal information, such as your credit card numbers. You want to treat those as much as valuable as you would treat cash, and you would not want to give those out on a website that you might find through a random search. Those websites that are out there are almost certainly seeking to just take that small fee and do nothing to assist you with a Section 8 lottery. Coronavirus scams that the FTC has identified, there are several that we'll kind of touch upon today. There's a nice little handout flyer on the FTC website that we wanted to show you. So we've taken portions of it and put it here. And these are some things that they already can see throughout the nation are coming up more and more frequently. There are offers for vaccinations and home testing kits. both selling the products and, like I said before, becoming a marketer of these fake products. Again, realize the official public health network is going to alert folks when good vaccination kits or home test kits are available, but that's not going to come from some advertisement on the internet. You know, without good proof that they work, you need to avoid these types of products. Hanging up on robocalls, of course. Robocalls are persistent throughout the country, and they will almost always be illegal. If you've said, do not call me again, they can continue to call. They're trying to simply get money from you or personal information from you, and you have every right to hang up on a robotic call like that. Those robocalls almost always are illegitimate because it's the cheapest way to reach out to someone's phone. So when you have a scammer wanting to reach millions of people, having a telephone that is dialed by computer is the fastest way to do that. And if you have recorded messages, it's again more likely than not that those are probably not things you requested. Okay. Phishing, as I mentioned before, with a PH, make sure you're not providing information from emails or texts that are sent out in droves to consumers, and then you respond to those and provide information that you wouldn't want to give someone. Right now, too, there's a lot of charity that we all like to give in a crisis. We want to help others, and the more giving you are, the more likely you might fall prey to a charity scam. You want to make sure that you're donating wisely. You can look up legitimate charities online. You can also check with ftc.gov/charity to make sure that your donation is a good one. And as new scams come forward, the FTC has a coronavirus page as well that they are updating people as quickly as they identify new scams. They're actually they're putting them up on the web, and you can also subscribe so that you would get alerts as scams come forward, as new scams are created or found. What about those of us who work from home? There are also scams for people that are working from home, and we wanted to go through a few of those for people that maybe aren't as concerned as much about the relief payment check they're getting as, what do I need to do to protect myself while accessing all kinds of data at work or elsewhere? How do I make sure that I don't do anything that's going to harm my business, my company that I work for, or my own equipment? Cyber actors often will use what looks like legitimate telework software, things that might be free or reduced, to gain sensitive data or to eavesdrop on your conversations. Now, how might they do that? Well, one thing you need to realize is if a service is free, there's some way that company intends to make money. It may be that they're offering free video conferencing to grow their user base, but it might also be that once you sign up for a free video conferencing software, that company might have the ability to turn on your computer's audio and video at any time without letting you know it's on. So you really have to be sure that the companies you're using for telework are legitimate. Either your employer has provided it, or that it's a well-respected source. Sometimes free can be accurate and be safe, but a lot of other free offers are not. Even paid offers could have malicious links or other issues with them. So always make sure you research the software you're using, okay? Whether it's mobile or on the computer at home, you've got to make sure these are real vendors and not false. These are some more tips that we had on untrusted sources. Another trick besides the phishing I keep bringing up is you can use tools that block suspected phishing emails. Some good email programs let you set your security settings so that it can be stronger and makes it where you're able to block emails that look like they're false. I would recommend you set your settings high if you can, and make sure that you can do that, and maybe even quarantine the emails that look like false ones. Another problem you might have is you might try to type in a legitimate website name, but then you accidentally type it wrong by one digit, by one letter. Scammers will buy the URL, the addresses that are very similar to real companies, hoping that you mistype it and then land on their site. So even if it looks legitimate, you've got to make really sure that those websites are accurate. You might want to bookmark the proper website and use it from a bookmark. But if you type it in and make that one error, you'll find all the time that are going to be similar links that do not lead to the real companies. So make sure that you don't fall prey for that type of problem. Also, never open attachments or click links with emails from senders you don't know, or even attachments you don't expect. When you get an email, even if the link has a name you might recognize, or the attachment has a file name you might recognize, the problem is those names can be faked. So if you, for example, were getting something from a boss and you didn't really expect it, it came at an odd time of day, or it's, hey, I need help with this project, and it just says project 2 on the file. Understand that if your boss didn't really send that, and they're pretending to be the boss by spoofing his name, her name, then what they might actually have done is sent you a file that you download to your machine and corrupt your system. This is a more common scam than you might first believe. So if you get an odd, ill-timed attachment even from someone you do recognize, there's nothing wrong with emailing back. Did you really send me this? I'm not sure about this. This isn't something you usually send me. That will stop a lot of these attacks and help a ton preventing things like hijacking your software, hijacking your server. Many of the exploits that we've seen in the past few years have come from a boss sending something to, or what looked like a boss sending something to another employee, and the employee opens it, and all of a sudden the entire computer system is hijacked. So this is a real problem, and it really can happen to anyone. So unexpected links, don't click. Unexpected attachments, check first. You can always check and see if they're legitimate. What about when you use communication tools, things like Zoom, Teams, Slack, Skype, Google Meet, and on, all the things we're using now to try to communicate? How can we be tricked by these types of software? What vulnerabilities do they have? First of all, we can talk about how to prevent simple attacks. If you restrict access to remote meetings, to conference calls, virtual classrooms, just restricting the access alone and not leaving it wide open is a great way to prevent unsolicited people from jumping inside of that meeting. If it's a wide open link to a meeting, those links are everywhere on the web. So if you can use a password, probably should use a password. If you need to share a password with others, don't share the password and login in one spot. You could, for example, put the login in one place and then the password somewhere else. And that will help guarantee that fewer people would be able to put the two things together. One thing that has happened recently is a phenomenon called Zoom bombs or Zoom bombing. And on Zoom, what the problem usually is when people come into a meeting that shouldn't be there is they have checked throughout the public web, the World Wide Web, and they find links to meetings that are out in the public. If you put a link out in public, it can be found whether or not it's the person that you wanted to send it to. The web itself is archived. And so hackers use something called crawlers to crawl the web for certain kinds of information. So you could set up a small program that said, look for every Zoom link that's public that has the right type of address to be a link to a Zoom meeting. And they do that. And then we end up with the things we've seen on the news, where people that don't belong have suddenly just jumped into the middle of a meeting, hence a Zoom bomb. The better practice would be to send a meeting invite with encrypted messaging apps or email. Now, when I say the word encryption, I know a lot of people think, oh, I don't understand that. What is it? Most good email today is already encrypted. If you're using a good email system, most standard email systems encrypt messages, and most good messaging apps today are encrypted. What we mean is, don't just leave these breadcrumbs out on the web, send it in a secure tunnel. So look at, how are my messages encrypted with whatever favorite device or app you use, and that'll help you know how hard would it be for people to grab that information. Those are the methods, the things that are encrypted are the methods you might want to use to share data like a meeting website. Business email compromise, I talked about a little bit earlier, where, for example, a boss might be hijacked, look like he's asking for a file, but in reality, it's some kind of malware. This is a scam that targets people not just for files, but also things like wire transfers, checks, things like that. Some businesses have actually cut checks to bad actors that never should have received them, simply because a boss said, hey, provide X thousand dollars to this other company. It turns out it wasn't really the boss that said that. Or perhaps it's a treasurer that says, I think we need this check sent out. You have to make sure that these email requests are importantly tracked, and there's feedback. If there's any doubt, you go back to the source and make sure you check for it. Okay. These are some examples of things you might look out for to prevent these kinds of compromises. Urgent, last minute type of wire instructions, or recipient account info. Oh, I need this done in the next hour, right away. Oh, we've just changed the wire instruction. Why is it so urgent all of a sudden? If that's makes you think, well, this doesn't sound right, it probably isn't right. Don't let false urgency be the reason that you don't think about it, you just automatically send. Same for changing your established communication platform. So, instead of the normal work email, it's, send this to my Gmail account at home. Or, I need you to message this on a different system. That should be an absolute bar to doing anything further. When it's out of the ordinary, there's got to be a reason it's out of the ordinary. And you need to check with whoever's sending those messages, or who you think might be, to see if they really did, in fact, send them, right? Here's another good example. When they only want to send emails and refuse to communicate by telephone, or vice versa, I would tell you, if it's someone calling but never providing you a bricks and mortar address or an actual website that you can go check, when you can't find enough information to be sure the communications are accurate, that's a clear sign that there might be some sort of compromise going on. Requests for advance payment of services when not previously required. You've been billing, a company's been billing, a vendor's been billing, and now they want advance payment. That's a sign that you should be careful. You should watch for that. Or changing direct deposits. Imagine if you were working and direct depositing your income, and then all of a sudden someone emails and says to your payroll company or your payroll provider, I need to change my direct deposit. Here's the new information. And now that scammer has the info and not you, and they are now receiving a check until someone checks it and stops it. So there should be formal ways that these things are done. And if your company has a particular way that's done and it's out of the ordinary, you have to assume that something's wrong, and you want to stop things right at that time. There are some websites that you can go to if you think you have had a fraudulent incident. The FBI has an especially good center here, this complaint department called Internet Crime Complaint Center. And then we also have the BEC, or email victims, which is BECIC3.gov. So the BEC being business email compromises. There's a special portion of this Internet Crime Center for that. You might just jot that down or provide it to your company so that they know if anything does happen, this would be the place to go, and the FBI can immediately investigate that. What about schooling at home? Our students today are doing what they can from home, making the best of things. And most parents are trying to work from home, or if they're not working, they're trying to assist the student to still learn. There's a variety of companies that provide what are called education technology, ed tech for short. All kinds of online learning programs and things that teachers want to use to link the student to the school remotely through computer technology. These things work. However, they do provide a vector, an opening for student data, for your child's data to be if not stolen, at least gathered in a way you might not be comfortable. So what we really want to do is make sure that if your student or your child is using some kind of educational technology, here are some things you might think about to protect them and their information. First, an example hack that we have learned of. There was a cyber actor that exploited certain school information by hacking into many school district servers throughout the United States. And when they did that, those servers in school districts had student data, education plans, homework assignments, even medical records and counselor reports. And then from that data, they were able to use that to contact the students and threaten them, and threaten to release personal information or threaten physical violence. These hackers even sent text messages to parents and local law enforcement. They publicized certain student private information, posted personally identifiable information, and they even stated how the release of that information could help child predators identify new targets. Now, that repugnant behavior is terrible, but the question is, how did it occur? And what happened is the school districts clearly did not have sufficient security in place for all that data that was being stored. But now that we are using more and more online services, keep in mind that your student is giving away that information on almost every resource they're using. So keep in mind, what are your children using in ed tech? You know, what are the names of the software that they're using, or the cloud version of the software? What kind of online services are they using? Who could see that data? Who can use it? Who can sell it? Who can tell if there's going to be a data breach? Who would it be that would tell a parent about it? Does the student know? Does the school know? Is the company going to directly contact parents? These are the things you want to think about before one of these breaches occurs. And what about deletion? Can your child's data be deleted? Can that be done completely? That's something you want to make sure that you can do, that you can erase the data that's left out on the web. If you can't, there needs to be a very good reason that that data is being collected, and you should want to know why. And of course, make sure you Google your child. Make sure that what you find on them about them on the web is legitimate and is not too much information leaking out. If you simply use a Google search or some other search for your child's information, and the ed tech they're using all of a sudden makes them open to many more contacts from strangers, that's something certainly you should be alerted to, and you'd want to discuss that with the school or whatever other provider is using that ed tech. Let's find out how many breadcrumbs these companies leave on the web about your child. So that's important. Do that every so often as we go through this process of communicating remotely as new data being put out there into the public. When children create user profiles on these types of resources, make sure that they think about maybe using only initials instead of full names, or avoiding exact dates of birth. You know, why would they ever need to have an exact date of birth, right? That, you know, wouldn't something close be good enough? Probably is. And does anyone really need a photo? A lot of times there's going to be an avatar, a little picture profile on some service, but maybe it's not such a good idea for a minor to have those photos on the web so that people can better track them. And one thing I've wanted to mention is never assume that the school knows better than you do what information your child should share. If you have concerns, ask the school those questions. Make sure that the school knows you have concerns, and can we minimize the amount of public information that's being shared on the internet and still provide a good experience for the child. Odds are there are good private ways, or at least limited ways, to share data. And maybe people just didn't think about the risk of putting that data out there into the public. So it's very good to have those conversations before anything goes wrong. General tips on cybercrime vulnerability could really probably take up its own whole presentation, but we've provided a few here, things you might want to do as an individual or even as a business to prevent cybercrime from occurring in other words, people invading or hacking into your information, changing passwords on devices, of course, making sure passwords are robust, making sure you watch for misspelled domain names, where I mentioned, if they're one digit or one letter off of the normal name. Multi-factor authentication. If you haven't done multi-factor authentication, go ahead and switch to that. What that means is these are sites that you might put in a password, but also get a message on your phone, a text message where they give a code, so that it's two ways that you're checking that the person accessing the info is actually the right person. Most software today has multi-factor authentication available, and you can even upgrade your Google accounts and your Microsoft accounts to multi-factor. If you want to protect your data, it's probably worth that extra effort to go ahead and do two methods of logging in instead of one. And that's really all MFA is adding the number of ways we're authenticating who's accessing the information. Some of the big don'ts that we thought we should share regarding general cybercrime would be, as we've mentioned, don't open attachments or click links that you don't know are solid and legitimate. Try not to provide the personal information that phishers ask for, that hackers are looking for, such as usernames, birth dates, social security numbers. If you're just getting an email or a phone call you don't recognize, don't provide those types of information. Make sure to use, if you're using a Wi-Fi access point, try to make sure that it is a private one. If you're going to use public Wi-Fi access, think really hard before you share any sensitive information, because anybody that comes along that can get to that public site can very easily intercept the information you share through that Wi-Fi. And many people do this last one, but you really should avoid it, which is using the same password for multiple accounts. There are many password keeper programs that will assist you. Maybe you keep a book at home, but the more times you use the same password in different accounts, the easier it is to break into all of those accounts. Ask yourself if you would use one skeleton key for every lock you own, and would that be a safe thing to do? If the answer is no, then why would you do it for your passwords? Again, if you can't remember all those passwords, and I know I can't, I use an encrypted password keeper online that keeps many dozen passwords for me, and I can always go back and access those in an encrypted format so that I have them when I need them, but don't have to remember all those different things. Okay, additional COVID updates will be available from Legal Services of Eastern Missouri on our website at lsem.org, COVID-19 updates. As the news comes out about new programs and new plans, and as the government updates their orders, the executive orders, the court orders, we're doing our best to share that information with you on this website. I hope you found today's presentation enjoyable. And if you wanted to go back and get some of the information from the FTC, I have provided a share location for you to do that. The FTC handouts that we have used today are on this website. And I did password protect this folder. Money Mondays is the password. That is cap specific. So it'd be capital M Money, capital M Mondays. And this folder will contain not only this presentation, if you wanted to look back at something, but also the FTC's information that was contained within this particular presentation. My name again was Terry Lawson, consumer attorney at Legal Services. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us and for helping us help you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson, for those consumer tips and for those resources. We will now take some questions from our viewers. One viewer asked, is there a way to receive my stimulus payment faster if I pay someone to help me? Could this be a scam, Mr. Lawson?
Almost certainly it could be a scam. Whether or not this particular scenario is one is something we can't tell you. But as we mentioned in the presentation, There should be no reason to pay anyone to get your refund check or your relief payment quicker. There's no requirement whatsoever for that to happen. And there are already channels that the checks are going to go out in the speed that they're going, and no one will need to be paid to accelerate that. If you're receiving that message, I would absolutely assume it's a scam.
Thank you for that. Mr. Lawson, we have another viewer who expressed concerns about receiving repeated emails requesting donations be made to a Cash App address. The viewer notes that when they delete the email, another one arrives shortly thereafter. Is this possibly a scam?
Yes, once again, that sounds typical of the kind of scam you'd want to avoid. The repeated messaging certainly makes us think that that would be the case as well. One thing you might try is certain times you can block addresses. You might check and see when you delete it if the address can be blocked. Now, they might try a new address for that and use different address, which are called alias addresses for email. But I would try to block that address and also make complaint to the FTC, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or the Missouri Attorney General if it persists.
Thank you. I have another question. If I pay into a business that's running a pyramid scam, can I get my money back?
One thing that our consumer program wants to do is inform consumers how to avoid being scammed in the first place. And that's why we do these types of meetings and presentations. Your question is whether or not you can get money back. It's extremely hard in many multi-level marketing scams to receive money back. If there is money available further up the chain, you may be able to do that in a lawsuit, but lawsuits are very costly and they take a lot of time. So if you don't immediately get money back, it may be difficult to receive it. That's not to say there's no way it can be done. Many people remember a gentleman named Bernie Madoff who committed a huge $1 billion pyramid scheme, essentially. And many people received some money back, but even millionaires and billionaires lost money. And with all their resources, they weren't able to get all their money back. So unfortunately, the best way to avoid losing the money is to just not participate in the beginning. But if you're going to try to receive it, move quickly to either use the courts or use the government as a means to extract money back. On occasion, if they grab those people quickly enough, the Attorney General or the U.S. attorneys may be able to receive some of that fund back and then share that among the victims. Those are the things you'd want to do to move quickly to possibly get money back.
Okay, thank you for that. Then we have one last question. I received an email from a creditor saying I should make my monthly payments to a special website because of COVID-19. Could this be a scam?
It could. That's a closer call because it is possible that some company has set up a different website if they're dealing with customers in a different manner. You know, it might be that there are certain creditors that would provide specific COVID-related resources. The problem is, without more information, we wouldn't know if that particular creditor did that. So number one is it would seem unusual to have to do it unless there was, for example, money that company was taking from COVID relief payments themselves, for example, or something the CARES Act might provide. But how did we talk about in this presentation how to check that? And it would be contact the creditor separately in a different channel that you know works and double check whether or not this other website is legitimate. That's what I would do first in this instance. You know, because the creditor would also want to know if it is a scam that some other company is using that website. They could help shut that down more quickly. So I would contact the creditor directly through a different medium, a different address, etc. Find out if this is really what you need to do. Odds are going to be it's not, but that's the best way to find out is do a separate contact.
Thank you for that, Mr. Lawson. It's great advice. I don't see that we have any other questions or comments. So thank you, Mr. Lawson, for joining us. And thank you to all of our viewers for joining us for another Money Monday. Today's session and the recording from our prior events are saved on our Facebook page. Feel free to follow us, like us, and receive additional updates regarding additional legal information as they become available. Please join us next Monday at 6:30 p.m. right here on Facebook for our session on student loans and COVID-19 relief. See you guys next week. Thanks.